Okay, so of the several images that I captured of this house, this is the particular one that I chose to edit, and I'll explain why in just a second. But first, I want to say that I captured this in RAW format. It doesn't matter whether you shot in RAW or JPEG, you're going to edit whatever you have to work with, and that's fine. I'm using Adobe Lightroom to perform my edit with. If you don't have Adobe Lightroom, that's fine. You can follow along, because I'm going to use basic editing controls such as exposure and contrast that you would pretty much find in any editing piece of software, even if it was in your phone. So, but I don't suggest using a phone to actually do the edit with, and I'll explain why in just a second. So let's turn the controls on here, and let me show you why I chose this one. See these shingles on the side of the house here? They're nice and crisp. They're in focus, and that tells me that pretty much the rest of this is going to be in focus. Like, you can even see the lines, you know, in the blinds here in this window. So I know that this is a good in focus shot. Now, and that's because it was on a tripod, because remember, the shutter was open for 2 seconds. But I did get some ISO noise up here. And you know, you remember now, if you back out, you don't really see that noise. If you zoom in, so some photographers tend to, you know, worry about the noise a little more than they really should. But with that said, I think this is a good image to choose, because I think a lot of people are going to end up with some noise of some sort in their image, and I'm going to show you how I kind of lessen the noise. You're never going to take it away, but you can lessen it a lot. And one of the things you can do is just zoom out. Okay, so first thing I like to do, getting into the basic edit here, is first thing I want to do is I want to crop. And I want to give this a 16 by 9 or a 1920 by 1080, which is your high def size. That's the size of a high def television. So I like to go with that because I think that looks good on social media like Facebook, and that's the ratio of the crop. So with that said, I'm going to crop out this dead area over here, the neighbor's porch light. We don't need that. So I'm just going to bring that in to right about there. So I still want that tree in there because it's got all that color, and I want the bush down here. I just kind of want that whole scene to be in there. I don't need this foreground here. There's nothing there, nothing to see. So I'm going to pretty much move it right about there. And as far as compositing goes, rule of thirds, if you know what that is, that's what this grid is, rule of thirds. I'm almost, I guess rule of thirds, I would probably put, you know, the photo, well, it would be like right there on the peak of that house. But then I lose a little of the tree. So I'm going to break the rule of thirds and go right about there. Okay. So we're going to go right about there, and also I think I need to straighten my house, maybe a little, I don't know, right about there. At least I think that's it. Okay, so now first thing I want to do is I want to zoom in and just kind of look around. I see I have a lens flare here from the bright light. That's kind of cool, actually. So I'm noticing that these clouds that are back here in the background, and this is a little obscure, but these clouds in the background are kind of a yellowish tint, and this light here in the front is not affecting them at all. So that means that the scene is probably a little too yellow. And I'm just gonna, and that obviously made everything a little more purple. It cooled the photo down a little bit. So I moved my white balance. Yours might be different, but I moved my white balance down a little bit. Now I'm going to bring exposure a little darker. I'm going to go down to about 30, maybe 40. And that kind of darkens, and that, you know, lessens the noise a little bit, but it still keeps everything nice and bright here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run my contrast up. I'm going to go up about 25. Contrast helps darken a little bit, but it also defines things a little bit better. And if you have blacks in your editing software, I'm going to go down on the blacks again about 30, and that looks pretty good. That kind of darkened that sky down like it should have been, and like I want it to be, put it that way. And that looks pretty good. Now let's zoom in just make sure everything is still looking good. And we could, if you have a vibrance or a saturation, I'm going to add, like, if it's vibrance, I would add about 20. If it was saturation, I wouldn't go more than 5, because then things are going to start to look, you know, a little weird. And you could do both vibrance and saturation, maybe back down a little bit on that. And that's pretty much the edit right there. If you wanted to do another thing, and this is something that I wouldn't suggest doing in a phone, and that is performing sharpening. At least my experience, whenever I go to sharpen something in the phone, it goes horribly wrong, because it looks good in the phone on that small display. Even if I zoom in on it, it still looks good. When I post it to social media and I look at it, I just, like, I'm embarrassed, actually. I'm like, you know, I'm supposed to be a professional photographer, and there's what I posted. So with sharpening, I'm already at, Lightroom brings me in at 25 to start with, because it was a raw image. It has to add some kind of sharpening to it, otherwise we wouldn't even want to look at it. I'm going to run it up to 40. And Lightroom, this is a little bit of an advanced thing, does give me a masking option to only apply the sharpening where I want it. So like anything that you see that's white in this image is the sharpening is being applied, but it's not being applied in the black areas, like that it doesn't need to be. And that's the thing, if you apply sharpening in an area where there's nothing there, sometimes it makes it look really weird. So by adding the saturation, I noticed that it really brought my green out in this, and that's kind of cool. So that, I would say that's the edit right there. That's pretty much, turn that off, we get a full screen here, and that's it. That would be nice Christmas light. Now, because I'm a creative kind of person and I would like to take it one step further, I would go in and I would probably go with, let me close that, I would go with split toning. And with split toning works off of your highlights and your shadows, and I'm going to saturate it up to about 40. I kind of know right where I want to go with this because I already did it and it looked nice. Now I saturated a greenish color to the highlights, and if you notice what it did was, and I'll turn this on and off, it put a green cast to the highlights. You see right there when I turn that on, and it also really greened up anything that was already green. Now I'm going to go ahead and saturate, and I'm going to run this one only up to about 35, and run this up to almost 200, right about there. And if I turn that on and off, and that really made the green come out. I really love that edit right there. That's the one edit I'm going to go with. And I know that's a little advanced right there at the end. But to recap with your basic edit, basically all I did was go in and do my white balance a little bit. I did my exposure down a little bit, contrast up a little bit, blacks down a little bit, and then we added a little bit of vibrance. And that was all I did to achieve that first edit, which is right there. And then if you wanted to, you know, get a little bit crazy and you know about split toning, do something like that. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching this, and this will give you an idea on how to go out and capture low light photos. It doesn't have to just be Christmas lights. It can be the city lights at night, city light photos, and I should do a tutorial on that one too, where, you know, you got the cars moving, so you're going to have those red streaky tail lights or the yellow streaks from the headlights, but everything else is in focus, and that's kind of cool too. And you can do that with a cell phone with a tripod, or some way to fix your cell phone so that it doesn't move while that shutter is open. Okay, everybody, thank you so much.